Hey guys, wanted to do a little video here about the Carrier Minisplit installation I did on my 2020 Ford Transit van. I waited 10 months to do this video because even though the unit installation looked all nice and shiny and new when I first put it on, I didn't want to have problems and then later have to come back and do a correction video. And so and that's going to lead me into a couple comments I want to make before I get started. So there are a number of other people who have tried this and put mini splits in various configurations on vans, and the most promising one I've seen, at least if you dig into the comments, it's pretty clear that there's still been some changes made. At least in one case, he changed the length of the service loop, and that's a major job. And so, you know, where's the video on that? It was just kind of buried in a comment, and I asked about a month ago how it was going and didn't get a reply. So I don't know, maybe that one's working, but either way, to get it working, it added quite a bit of length to an already extended length van. So that one, you know, maybe it's good, but it's a little concerning. Another video, it's clear that the guy has to leave the doors open to use it. I mean, both the rear doors open, and so, you know, you can already see dirt and crud building up in there. And, you know, maybe a couple trips of the year that's going to work, but that's not a long-term solution. A third one, you know, it was clear the condenser was blocking both doors on this guy's install, and when I first asked him about it, he said, oh yeah, the doors can open. And, you know, I had to press through 3 comments to get him to finally admit that no, the doors are normally blocked. He has to completely unbolt and remove the condenser to open the doors. So, you know, the answer to the question was no, the doors are blocked, and he should have just said that. Another guy had cut some holes in the back and obviously didn't have the required clearances met on his install, so he was drawing like 800 watts continuous. So, you know, that's not good. And then the last person I want to mention is more like the person that I want to be like, and he inspired a lot of things I did on this install by being totally honest. He said, I tried a mini split install on a Sprinter and it failed at the flare fittings. And so his honesty and the current build he's doing now is really great to follow. He's doing a lot of excellent stuff, some of which I'm quite jealous about. He's not doing a mini split though, so that ought to tell you something. But his honesty is something I want to try to, you know, carry through in this video and give you guys what I'm going to call the good, the bad, and the ugly of trying to put a mini split on a van, especially if you want to open the rear doors. Like you know, it would be, you know, a fair bit less work if you just gave up on the doors, but if you want to open them, expect a lot of work. So, all right, with that in mind, I want to just kind of give an overview of part 1 is going to be the outdoor unit, the condenser here. And so I'm going to kind of give an overview of how I physically got it installed, why I did some things I did. And to start with, I want to talk about the line sets. I wish that I had done a slightly better looking wrap on the line sets, but Gorilla Tape makes this super thick Gorilla Max, and it looked pretty nice when I first put it on. Again, I showed a clip of that, and I'll show it again real quick. Now you can see the Gorilla Tape's kind of peeled back, and so I actually bought a number of really expensive air conditioning wraps and tested them, but the Gorilla Tape was so strong I decided to use it. But the reason that you know, it worked is I could do pieces of it at a time, and you know, sections where I couldn't get a full wrap. And the reason for that is what makes most mini split installs fail are leaks at the line sets, so, or at the fittings. So you've got a pair of fittings right here, and then you've got at least one more inside the van. But this is the one that's at the highest risk, because when you're driving a van down a 4x4 road, which, you know, at least in my case, I got a lift kit and I'm trying to get away from the crowds, you got a picture, it's like an earthquake back here. It's like literally driving through a 10.0 earthquake, you know, every day. So all of that shaking and rattling and vibration, when you're using copper fittings, you know, flare fittings are just copper on copper. And you, even if you shake them just like a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch, if you do that a few thousand times and you're really going down rough roads, they're going to fail. Now, some people that have done this and maybe they're sticking to highways and they've got these super extended length ones and their installs sticking out, you know, much further than this, it's no surprise that you know, they may have been able to make it last. But I'm trying to get down Jeep trails and 4x4 trails, and so the amount of vibration this thing goes through is really intense. So what I did to help mitigate that is I used Rector Seal Pro Fit fittings that have a rubber gasket instead of copper on copper flares. And HVAC guys will tell you that the gaskets might fail someday, but they're just speculating. One advantage that ProFit fittings have is that rubber gasket has better vibration tolerance. So I use those, and then additionally there are bolts connecting to the Minisplit case itself, and insulated clamps, but still clamps right here, another one here, and a third one here. And what that does is when the Aluminess tire carrier frame that this all sits on, the Minisplit mounting arms, and even the metal Minisplit case itself, when they all flex a little, because metal will still bend and flex, especially under the strain of a big road, this unit and the line sets move together. So any motion that exists there exists together, which means there's no motion from the copper lines relative to the fittings out here. If I had just let these sort of float loose, they would have been doing this all the time relative to the fittings, and they probably would have failed, similar to what that really honest Sprinter guy told me about his flare fittings failing. So that's why I did that, to deal with the fact that there's just copper running in right here. I looked at using a flexible line set out here. I did use them on the inside to be able to open the door, but they didn't really help solve much of this problem where I needed the line set to be really well mounted, and they only like to flex in certain directions. They're real finicky. It's not like you would think where you can just flex them in any direction. They're really, really stiff. So to deal with the fact that this whole unit is going to move some relative to the van when it's shaking, I went ahead and put a big loop here, and these are just kind of floating like that. And during some tests, I could tell that with this type of a loop, the entire unit can now move slightly forward and back, or slightly this way, and it's all taken up in the loop instead of putting all that strain on the copper, which would have happened if I had just run the copper from there straight down. Eventually all that rattling would have potentially probably made the copper bend and break right there. So that's what the loop is for. I have some sort of safety straps on the front that are kind of fail safe, and then these straps also help keep the condenser really kind of connected and just free for top vibration. The bottom, it's got the arms, but normally the top would just sit free. So those straps just add a little bit of stability. And then unfortunately, all mini splits, and specifically the one I wanted to use, their weight is almost all over here. This is where the compressor and all of the heavy componentry is. So that put a ton of weight on the much smaller Aluminess bracket here that just goes inside to the door latch. And the Aluminess carrier is really designed to sling most of its weight off of these much beefier door brackets. They did some custom bends here, and you can just see how much bigger and stronger these brackets are. So the weight is supposed to be over there, but because of the way the mini split is made, it put too much weight here. So I did some tests before the condenser was on. I could sling my full body weight on the two arms and could kind of lean on one side or the other. And after I added this strap, it significantly reduced the amount of flex that the entire Aluminess tire carrier was experiencing. So it did help some. For the actual mini split arms, I tried a bunch of expensive brands, and this one random Amazon brand called Appy just clicked a lot of boxes. The length was right. I could even trim it a little further if I want, but this kind of helps provide a crumple zone if I accidentally back into something. It had two bolt holes here at the bottom, which normally on a house they don't worry about the movement in the upward direction, so a lot of them just had one bolt there. So the two bolt situation made it easier to lock the arm in the down position to help prevent this kind of rocking motion when it's going down a road. To actually mount them on, I just used U-bolts, stainless steel U-bolts from McMaster Car. I kind of pushed the U-clamp plate up in there, and then used some nylocks to help further stabilize everything, and that's worked out surprisingly well. For the top, the kit comes with one of these horizontal bars, and I needed to add a little bit of steel U-channel to the back, because the vehicles come with what they call a rake, where the rear of the vehicle is higher than the front. So the whole unit was just tilted too far this way. So that little bit of steel U-channel just helped me push the top out a bit to help get closer to vertical. But essentially the bar that came with that Appy kit worked very nicely with another U-clamp right here. This side was pretty easy. I also put a little piece of steel here and drilled through to actually bolt the top of the arm to this. Normally it's just kind of floating in that channel. So that's that side, pretty straightforward. Oh, for power, Carflex conduit. It's pretty straightforward. You drill a hole and put the fittings on. The wires were a little snug because I used silicone jacketed wire, but silicone has really good properties, so I decided to go ahead with that. On this side, it was much trickier because you can see the center where I have another bolt and the far right bar, they're parallel, but over here, the aluminous frame, you know, it actually curves. And so I just took a piece of aluminum block and cut it, and even used the grinder to shape it a little bit here to kind of provide some stability. Then another U-clamp with some really long stainless bolts. That worked out pretty well. Same thing of bolting this arm up here. And then for the bottom, it was similarly tricky because I needed a way for the bottom arm to really be able to push here. So I got some steel angle from Home Depot. I mean, it's only like 20 bucks, and cut it to length. And that actually runs the entire distance, and the other arm also sits right against it, although on that end, the steel is essentially flush with the tube. But down here, this helped create a location where now the arm, when I clamped with this U-bolt, could you know, have something to push against. And then because it's curved, when I tightened the U-bolt, it had a tendency to want to walk down the curve like that. So I added a little stainless worm gear here. It didn't need much tension, just a little bit, but by doing that, the clamp then stayed put. So that was pretty straightforward. So, you know, that's the outside condenser unit, and it's been 10 months, no leaks, and I've driven down tons of just crazy 4x4 roads. I've actually broken other things on the van just from the roads that I've taken it down. Had to replace a CV boot and other stuff. So this air conditioning unit has been rattled like you wouldn't believe. Death Valley, just all kinds of places. The good news is the efficiency is extremely good, and I'm super happy to have gone through days at 100 degrees Fahrenheit, where over a 24-hour period with it, you know, 70 to 72 during the day in the van, and then at night I like it cold, so put it at like 68. Over those 24-hour periods, I was averaging 200 watts, and again, that's, you know, 100-degree temps and full sun. So for me, that was beyond what I could ever have hoped in terms of efficiency when I started this project. And the great news is when I'm parked in the sun, which is of course not always, I have a 1110 watts of solar on the roof, and I'll do another video on that at some point in time. But on days where I'm parked in the sun, even a 100-degree Fahrenheit day, I'm net positive solar. So, you know, the air conditioner is essentially running off the sun. However, with solar, if it gets cloudy, you know, 4, 5, 6 days, it will eventually drain the battery bank. One other comment I want to make about mini splits is that most of them are 120 volt, and you know, even that's of course most people have that in the van already, but even that's dangerous, so you got to be a little bit cautious. To get the 42 SEER Carrier, which is the most efficient mini split they make, and of course, you know, there's Carrier, or there's SEER, there's EAR, there's even some other ratings and people debate about, but this unit is the top of the line in terms of efficiency. But to run it, it's 240 volts, so there's some other concerns that had to go in. That's why I used Carflex here, and I'll show you a little bit on the inside. I really went to town trying to make sure the wiring is safe. And my solar array is 130 volts, and at DC that's even more dangerous. And my battery bank is 48 volts, actually 51.2. But while there's some danger to that, and you got to be careful about what you're doing, the advantage is by being at a high voltage on the solar array, high voltage on the battery bank, and then a shorter distance. Going from 12 to 240 is a big jump, but going from 48 to 240, and it's an order of magnitude smaller. So that really helps in terms of efficiency. But you know, all that cost a lot of money. It took a lot of time to get going, and there is one problem that I've had that is fortunately more of a mild annoyance. It's not a functional problem, but I'm going to do a video at some point and kind of be more detailed on that. But the issue is I periodically will get a resonant tone on the indoor unit, It's possible that's because of my solution of mounting the bolting the line sets to the case. The vibration from the condenser, a little vibration could be getting picked up in the line sets, and then it could be hearing it indoors. But there's another more likely situation that occurred during the build that would be easy for someone else to avoid, but for me there was no way to avoid it. Carrier says they use 1/4-inch piping on the indoor unit, but it turns out while they provide you with a 1/4-inch fitting, they actually don't use 1/4-inch piping. It's slightly larger. I think it's a metric size. So I cut it to use one of those Rector Seal Profit fittings, and the size wasn't right. Every other fitting I did in the van was right, but that one, it just wouldn't go on. So I actually had to have a guy braze a little section of standard North American HVAC 1/4-inch copper on, and it's possible that even though we flushed with dry nitrogen while he did it, it's possible that could have created the issue with the resonant tone, could have made a little small carbon buildup at the expansion valve that's doing it. So it's something I got to solve, and it's it's one of the drawbacks of trying to do something like this is you're potentially going to face things that no one else has faced, and you have to, being the first, you have to sort and solve those problems. So good is extreme efficiency. Bad is you might run into a little snags during the install. And then what I'm calling the ugly is that, again, when I first did this, the line set tape looked pretty good, but now it's looking pretty rough. I think that could be fixed. But the real ugly, and I'll do this in a separate video, is when I open the rear doors, you'll see on the inside, in order to have the doors open with flexible line sets, there was just no elegant way to hide that. So it's not really that bad. And again, I'll show that in part number 2, but it certainly doesn't look aesthetically pleasing, and you could have a much more elegant looking install if you didn't try to do the mini split, or if you went through a lot of other effort to try to not have the line sets bend on the inside. Again, I've seen one other guy where he had it bending on the outside back here, but I'm still a little skeptical of his install because there's some changes being made, but that's another option too. So anyways, that's my good, bad, ugly part 1 mini split install. And I'll do part 2 on the inside, and then I think I'll do a part 3 with showing you some power consumption, letting you hear that little resonant tone issue that I'm sorting out, and some other stuff like that. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.